Hi, welcome to Write More Light. My name is Sarah, and I am excited to talk with you today about one of my very favorite forms, which is the list. This is a form that shows up in all different genres of writing, and I think that it's super versatile, and I'm super excited to talk about it. Clearly, I just said it's one of my favorites. So before we get started, I want to remind everybody that we're still accepting submissions to the Foster Stall chapbook series. That can be whatever your favorite form is. Go ahead and submit your chapbook length manuscript to us. We're also still accepting submissions for our 2020 anthology, and we'll talk more about that at the end of the video. Of course, as always, at the end we're going to have a free write as well, which will be on the topic. And yeah, let's get to it. So first, I personally write lists. I think they're fantastic. And in doing so, I've had to explain them to a lot of people, which I think is super weird. Maybe that's a little rude, but I think it's self-explanatory what a list is, right? It's a list, like a to-do list, a grocery list. And though I write essays, I don't think that it's weird to be like, hey, this essay is a list. But sometimes it is. It's not the most literary thing in the world. And so I've compiled a list. I've compiled a list of lists. First, I want to go into pop culture. Dua Lipa has that song that I don't know the title of. I'm gonna look it up. Dua Lipa. Pick up the phone. Her song is called New Rules, and she lists her rules, which are: one, don't pick up the phone. You know he's only calling because he's drunk and alone. Another one of my all-time favorite songs is Paul Simon's 50 Ways to Lose Your Lover, 50 Ways to Leave Your Lover, which I'm gonna slip out the back, Jack, make a new plan, Stan. Don't need to be coy, just get yourself free. Hop on the bus, Gus. Drop off the key, Lee. That's a list. He doesn't number them like Dua Lipa does, but that's a list. It's a list of the 50 ways to leave your lover. I don't know why I always say lose. That's annoying. So yeah, so we've all seen lists. We've all had a radio on at some point in our life. We all make lists before we go to the grocery store. So in turning that into a piece of writing, all we need to do is add details to it, which isn't so hard. My computer's trying to update. I apologize for the delay in my speech. I'm gonna keep going, and if it interrupts me, I'll deal with it when the time comes. So other pretty famous pieces of writing that deal with lists are, there's a lot of books that are written with recipes. The one that comes to mind for me is Like Water for Chocolate, in which the narrator separates the chapters, the sections of the book, with recipes. And sometimes inside the recipe, it'll be like 4 figs picked from this specific tree where we have this specific memory. So that's one way to do a list, which is to take each item on the list and give it meaning. And that's the easiest and probably the, forgive me, most fruitful way to do a list. It's probably the most poetic. I'm nervous to say that. That's a hell of a superlative I just gave it, but I think brevity is super, super important to lists in a lot of ways. And if you do a recipe, if you do a to-do list or a grocery list, then adding those tiny details are what gives it depth. So if it is a to-do list, right? You're writing a honey-do list, maybe. This is for your spouse, your best friend, your child, whatever. And you say, dust the mantelpiece. And then, because this is, and of course I'm speaking as if it's a narrative rather than a utilitarian document, but it's totally believable, totally feasible that one would be like, dust the mantelpiece with the dust cloth under the sink that Aunt Frida gave us. And that gives the reader background information. And then maybe at the next step on this to-do list, we need to wash the dust cloth under the sink that Aunt Frida gave us, but we need to wash it in a special way because despite the fact that this is a utilitarian cleaning object, it's special because it's from Aunt Frida. That's how lists get a robustness, and that's that's the most straightforward I think that that a list can be. In other I also have, I think these were super hot that they went around for a little while. There's the artist and writer cookbook, in which famous artists and writers gave their favorite recipe or a favorite recipe or a recipe. I'm not going to qualify how much each thing meant to each writer. But in that book, right, it's a compilation of recipes by famous people. In the directions, so there's the recipe list, which is all the items, right? It isn't necessarily going to say pick 4 figs from the tree that we kissed under on our first date. But in the directions to the list, this is why recipes are so fun, because they're 2 parts, right? You've got an ingredient list, maybe a supply list, right? And then you have the instructions. And in the instructions is where the meat of the story of a recipe is, right? So I have this book. I should have just put it in front of me for this. So in there you can say, remember the way that the fish swam up the river, knead the dough like that. It's a terrible example, but you get the idea. There's also the My Ideal Bookshelf, which was also super hot for a little while and compiled lists from famous people. Now in those lists, right, we have just a straightforward list of here's my 10 favorite books or whatever. And then each of the writers, they're mostly writers, some of them are other kinds of artists, say why this book is on my ideal bookshelf. So both of those things, the cookbook and the My Ideal Bookshelf, are teeny tiny little essays, teeny tiny little vignette essays based on a list. And that's a list. Other famous things I'll pull up. No, I don't have it up. Give me just a moment. I'm going to pull up Song of Myself by Walt Whitman and screen share with you. It's not a straightforward list like I had just mentioned, but it is a list in that it's written in list form. It's, number 1, and then this is how Whitman wrote a lot of things. It's number 1 and then text, and then number 2 and then text. So I'm just going to read the first 2 sections of it. So here we are. Song of Myself by Walt Whitman. 1. I celebrate myself and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loath and invite my soul, I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. Houses and rooms are full of perfumes, the shelves are crowded with perfumes. I breathe the fragrance myself, and I know it and like it. The distillation would intoxicate me also, but I shall not let it. The atmosphere is not a perfume. It has no taste of the distillation. It is odorless. It is for my mouth forever. I am in love with it. I will go back to the bank by the wood and become undisguised and naked. I am mad for it to be in contact with me. 2. The smoke of my own breath echoes, ripples, buzzed, whispers, love root, silk thread, crotch and vine. My respiration and inspiration, the beating of my heart, the passing of blood and air through my lungs, the sniff of green leaves and dry leaves of the shore and dark-colored sea rocks and the hay of the barn, the sound of the belched words of my voice, words loosed to the eddies of the wind. A few light kisses, a few embraces, a reaching around arms, the play of shine and shade on the trees as the supple boughs wag, the delight alone or the rush of the trees or along the fields and hillsides, the feeling of health, the full moon trill, the song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun. I'm going to stop here. It's a very long poem and we have more things to talk about. But just by putting those numbers out in front of each section, he's creating a list. And that's a list too. Something that defines a list, I am sure everyone needs to know what defines a list, is the delineation of sections. So while he could have written that with no numbers, he could have written that with words separating the sections. He didn't, and that gave us the idea that these are parts of a whole and they go in an order, and each of these items, each number is an item and it belongs to a list, the list being the poem, or the larger piece. We also have Alfred Lord Tennyson's Mermaid is a list poem. I don't know how much I want to read dead people poems to you, but I thought it might be good to bring up some classics so that people, can remember, like, here's the stuff that we studied, and this is not a new form. This is not some like cool postmodern avant-garde form that I'm introducing to the world. Although I would love to be that cool and avant-garde. So here is Alfred Lord Tennyson's Mermaid. You see, obviously, one, you can't see me pointing, 1, 2, and I'm just going to read the first 2 sections. Like I said, it's not that long, but the Mermaid. 1. Who would be a mermaid fair, singing alone, combing her hair, under the sea in a golden curl, with a comb of pearl on a throne? 2. I would be a mermaid fair, I would sing myself the whole of the day, with a comb of pearl I would comb my hair, and still I combed I would sing and say, who is it loves me, who loves me not? I would comb my hair till my ringlets would fall, low down, from under my starry seabud crown, low down and around, and I should look like a fountain of gold, springing alone with a shrill inner sound over the throne, in the midst of the hall, till that great sea snake under the sea, from his coiled sleeps in the central deeps, would slowly trail himself sevenfold, round the hall where I sate, and look in at the gate, with his large calm eyes for the love of me, and all the mermen under the sea would feel their immortality, die in their hearts for the love of me. I'm not great at reading rhymes, am I? That's a new and exciting thing to be bad at. In pop culture, maybe not pop culture, in the contemporary world, we've got Orange by Neil Gaiman, which is, I had a video up. You can find it on YouTube. Of course, you can just look it up. It's a really, really, really clever one that I would love to share. It's a short story. It's not a full novel or anything. It's a really beautiful piece. A favorite of, so there we have a couple of fiction examples and a couple of poetry examples. There's also Bluets, which I would probably call that's a favorite at the Midwest Writing Center. It's by Maggie Nelson. And I would call it probably a lyric essay. I know that Ryan would call it a poem. And I want to share it with you, but it's difficult to screen share what I have, which is either a book or a PDF. PDF is like sideways. But I'll read the first 2 sections. That's going to be my thing today, right? from Bluets by Maggie Nelson. 1. Suppose I were to begin by saying I had fallen in love with a color. Suppose I were to speak this as though it were a confession. Suppose I shredded my napkins as we spoke. It began slowly, an appreciation, an affinity. Then, one day, it became more serious. Then, looking into an empty teacup, its bottom stained with thin brown excrement coiled in the shape of a seahorse, it became somehow personal. And so I fell in love with a color, in this case, the color blue. As if falling under a spell I fought to stay under and get out from under in turns. This is 3 pages, I think, not very long, and it's about falling in love with a color. Ryan uses it in his obsession poem lessons, which is perfect. That's a wonderful, wonderful genre, and I also have seen color come up a lot in that regard. There's 2 poems that come to mind by Sam Green about colors, red and yellow. His, I believe, are about flowers. But the point being, there's something hard to quantify about color that makes it a really good one for trying to describe with creative language, which is not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is lists. As just an example that I am not always talking out of my behind, I will not read to you, but I will share that I have a list of mine has been published. It's, again, I would call it a lyric essay, and it's really straightforward. The title is just 6 Things I Learned from Your Death, and then that's what it is. And this I'm using as an example because I write essays, and this is the most straightforward way I can explain them. So I say, I'm going to say 6 things. I think, honestly, this started out as 10 or some much more round and user-friendly number. And then I say, okay, here's number 1. Here's number 2. Here's number 3. Obviously, there's going to be 6 of these because this is a list of things I learned. Now, when you do it in this way, your content can be anything because it's a list and then a description of the item that is listed. And that's the most straightforward way, I think, to write a list piece. And here's where we get into the lesson part. Legitimately, when I did this, I made a list on a piece of paper. I was thinking about my friend who died, and I said, okay, here are things that I learned. I process the world through writing, and I thought, maybe I can get some of this grief out, some of this anxiety out by trying to write about it. And that's really hard when you're having really strong emotions to be eloquent. So I was like, I'm just going to list stuff. That's something that I do a lot of the time when I'm having trouble expressing myself through writing is I make a list. Sometimes it's like, I just need to put pen to paper and here are the things I did today. Sometimes it's a legitimate to-do list like I have just described earlier on in this video. And sometimes I'm trying to really, really process something that really doesn't want to be processed. So I wrote these things down, and there were more than 6 initially. I collapsed a couple because they overlapped a lot. I don't know if it survived to, yeah, my number 1 on this, computer's trying to update again. My number 1 on this list is a body can get used to anything. And that's something that I've thought about a lot, about like the physicality of the world in a body and how something that seems like you wouldn't be able to deal with it, after some time becomes something that you just get used to. And that's something I thought about before my friend died. But it really, really came into sharp relief for me in thinking about her death because there were many things that I thought I was used to, and there were many things that I would have assumed I couldn't get used to. And this was an opportunity for me to write about it. And yeah, there were, I mean, depending on your content, depending on how fiction, nonfiction, poetry your content is, I think a great way to start doing this is just by writing a totally normal list. Um, Last week we talked about depression and how it affects our writing practice, how to get out of it, how to forgive ourselves for falling out of a writing practice, especially if it's for mental health reasons. And I have also, I haven't published these, so you don't get to look at them. I've also done that as a writing exercise when depressed. I'll make a to-do list for myself. And then because, I'm a to-do list person and it helps me to break down my tasks just in order to get them done. Also, I probably won't remember all of them if I don't write them down. So in as a writing exercise, I took this to-do list that I had written for myself that I probably abandoned and managed to like add really routine things to the list, like take a shower, cook a meal, because those are hard when you're not doing well. And then, added just one line of text to each item, right? Take a shower. It's been 3 days. Um, put on a bra, and then pretend that you're going out into the world. This will make you feel like a human being. Um, Fix a real meal for yourself. Don't just microwave. Or fix a real meal for yourself. Your body has lacked the nutrition for 7 days now. And that's, I mean, I'm not reading this to you. This is not the actual exercise that I did for myself, because that's in a long gone journal. But that's how easy it can be and how fruitful an exercise it can be. It doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be something that you're writing for publication, but it's an excellent exercise in getting you back into writing, or a warm up, free write, and also like not hard to do well, which I think there's a huge amount of external pressure or internal pressure, but there's a lot of pressure to write something good every time we write, which is just not going to happen. No matter how talented and wonderful we are, you're not always going to write something good. And it's easy to make a list sound good. Maybe that's arrogant. Maybe that's naive, but I think it's true, right? What I just came up with off the top of my head was real, but it was also not. I didn't prepare it in advance. I said in my notes, I said talk about my to-do list. So I think obviously, go back and edit later if it is a piece that you want to have out in the world, but I don't I yeah, I just think that lists are so wonderful for productivity, for ease of creation, and for their versatility. My greatest advice, of course, maybe not of course, but my greatest advice for a list is brevity. If you go on too long, and I mean like really long, then it's, less a list and more chapters, which is fine. I mean, you can absolutely think of a book as a list and the list is the chapters, or the items are the chapters, or probably more like a concept album than like a regular music album, but um, each track then is an item on a list. And I mean, you can translate this to any kind of art, right? Particularly like triptychs in or whatever art, visual art that has multiple pieces are also lists. But I'm not a visual artist. I can't really speak to that. um, yeah, I think that they're an excellent exercise and a really fun read. They're not hard to read. They're super accessible both in the reading and the writing. And I'm underrated if you ask me, and totally worth our time to both read and write. So the to-do list of writing a list is: one, make a list. 2, elaborate on each item. And then, edit later. But my third thing, which I think should probably come last, I'm terrible with titles though. Like maybe your point or your inspiration is the forefront of what you're writing. It's not for me. But with this piece, I am pink. With this piece that showed you from Beholder that I published, my intention was straight from the outset. So that's number 3 on the list of how to write a list. What do you have a point? Do you have an intention? Do you have a plot? Saying it straight out is often a wonderful title and saves you the work of having to explain yourself or get too deep into the weeds of like, here's what I'm here for. So if my depression to-do list, right? If I were to publish that, I would probably just title it to do or the date, because I want to be clear, like this is a regular to-do list. This is a day in the life. My piece about my friend's death is called 6 Things I Learned from Your Death. So at no point do I have to say explicitly in the list, here are things that I learned when you died. And it adds some weight to it by giving a really straightforward title in a list. You're not ruining the art, which is another thing, because I find titles so difficult in general. It's really cool to be able to be straightforward about what you're talking about. I don't know how long I've been talking to you, but I am feeling pretty good about letting you go. So yeah, keep in mind brevity is your best friend with lists. And then upcoming, I'm going to tell you about what's going on at the Midwest Writing Center, and then I'm going to leave you with your free write. So, like I said at the beginning, we are accepting, we're excited about, we're thrilled to receive your submissions for our chapbook series. That can be any genre that you write, except that we're not including visuals. So, which is a little funny with hybrid, right? But no illustrations is what I meant to say. Submit your chapbook length manuscripts with a acknowledgements page if some of the pieces in it have been published before. It can be poetry, it can be prose, fiction, nonfiction, essay, whatever it is that you write, hybrid included. Submit that to mwc@midwestwritingcenter.org. And we're also, so the deadline for that is New Year's, 12/31. Get that in. We will publish more than one if we get, a couple of really great standout pieces. This is going to be an annual series. You'll be in the inaugural crew. We're publishing this series to honor Mary Foster and Dick Stull, some literary legends locally. That's fun, local literary legends. We also have our 2020 anthology, which is to be a time capsule or historical document about what happened here locally in 2020. So the Foster Stull Chapbook series, you do not have to be from our service area, but we do prefer for the 2020 anthology that you are from our service area, with exceptions made for slightly outside the service area here in the Midwest and standout pieces. All the information about, and the deadline for the 2020 anthology is 1/31, January 31st. And we're willing to offer our board of directors is willing to offer editorial support or take dictation. So if you have any questions on that, visit or email submissions@mwcqc.org. Additionally, for any other information about upcoming opportunities, classes, publications, visit mwcqc.org. Now for the free write, we talked about lists today. We talked about what they are, what they can be, what they mean, and a tiny bit on how to write them. I think that the really beautiful thing about lists is the simplicity of it. You don't need to come at it in this really craftful, artful, big brain way. You can write what comes and then edit it later, which I always say that, but I think it's much easier if it's a low pressure scenario, like a list. So I am going to challenge you right now, setting the timer here. That's a clock. I'm not there yet. um, no, I can't find my clock. To write a to-do list as a poem, piece of fiction, or essay or hybrid, whatever it is that you write. A receipt is a really good one. We had one of our young emerging writers um, published a not stopwatch timer published a receipt as a poem in the Atlas this summer, and it was fantastic. It was sarcastic, which is another fun thing that I find with lists is that because of the short form, potentially short form, it can be very, very long. Um, but because of the short form, it's easier to be funny. Um, I'm not very funny, so I have found that brevity makes it a little easier. Anyway, I'm pretty sad we're getting a handful of new watchers. I wasn't looking at the Facebook feed until just now, right as we're opening into the free write. So thank you so much for coming. Rewind the video to see what I've been talking about. And I'm going to set the timer now for 5 minutes. And I'm going to write my to-do list. And I hope that if you're checking out now, that you write more light into your life. And if you're not checking out now, you write a wonderful list, and then I'll tell you to write more light at the end. So timer started. I will likely talk to you periodically as I write my to-do list. And as always, it's totally okay to write whatever comes. This is a free write. If you end up journaling about lists, dope. If you end up journaling about your day, dope. If you end up just making yourself a to-do list because you need a to-do list, dope. I'm already struggling. I wanted you to be able to see my pen. Oh, fun thing I meant to mention, you can totally use this prompt to write something for the 2020 anthology. You can write a list that is 2020 January is one item, February is one item, March is one item, etc. There are 12 months. Or, what to do to prepare for quarantine, or what to do when you get sick, or a list of symptoms. That could be a really cool one. That's a list of symptoms. And then, like, can I call the doctor? I've got 2 minutes left. I still can't see my pen. That's annoying. I feel like if you can see my pen, then that's like an accountability exercise. Like, yes, here I am writing with you. 8 seconds left. Sorry for interrupting. Just as soon as I thought that I was going to be able to write more. Okay, so I did a to-do list for entering into quarantine. It's a it's not my real to-do list. It was more an exercise than anything, but also I wanted to use it as an example, right? Because I don't think most of us had time to prep for quarantine or for shutdown. You know, we didn't know if it was coming. We didn't know what to expect. This year's been a whole lot of curveballs. But I have on here grocery list. What do we even eat? Staples, question mark, question mark, question mark. Food storage, question mark, question mark. Clear out a closet, question mark. Get everyone's contact info. And then I have people listed and then what they use for video chatting. So I have mom, FaceTime, work, Zoom, bestie on Duo. Duo's a Google product. And then I have find out what Marco Polo is. Then I have an item, daily schedule, how to stay sane, question mark, budget in all caps, panic, and then a subcategory for panic is mindfulness, question mark. I personally am no good at like meditating or like mindfulness practices. So that was a little funny joke for myself. And then supplies, and I wrote masks on here, but I'm thinking in March we weren't wearing masks. So other items are cold meds, thermometer. Yeah, that's it. That's just an example. I hope that you had fun with this. I hope that this is a fruitful form for you. And I really want to read more lists in my life. So like write them and let me read them. Again, submit, submit, submit. We have the Foster Stall Chatbook series. It doesn't have to be poetry. The deadline for that is New Year's Eve, 12/31. We also have the 2020 anthology deadline for submissions for that is January 31. As always, write more light into your life. Hit us up with questions, comments, concerns. If you have some resources you're looking for, some lessons that you want to have, me and Ryan can do. Me or Ryan will do a write more light, you know, on a topic that you are super passionate about, that you want some education about. We're here. We want to be a community resource, and we love this community, and we love to write. So I'll leave you with that. Write more light into your life.